And welcome back to America's Forum. I'm John Bachman. Tensions in the Ukraine, as we've been telling you, are escalating again today as Russian President Vladimir Putin says the country is on the brink of civil war. This, as Ukraine's military has launched its first formal military action against pro-Russian militants. Troops have retaken an airport in the eastern Donetsk region after a reported firefight with gunmen. Meanwhile, pro-Russian troops have seized police headquarters and administration buildings in the region. And combat vehicles have entered an eastern Ukrainian city flying Russian flags. The 6 armored vehicles rolled into a city near the Russian border and were met enthusiastically by pro-Russian people at checkpoints inside the city. This, as Ukraine's military has launched its first formal action, as we told you. Now, joining us right now to discuss all this is Professor Mark Nuckols. He's in Moscow right now. He's American living there, and as you can imagine, things are a little tense. We talked to Mark yesterday. We wanted to check back in with him. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, doing just fine.
All right, so you kind of laid out the situation for us yesterday. As an American in Moscow right now, with tensions increasing between Ukraine and Russia, and the United States and Russia as well, you're also feeling that on the streets of Moscow. But we wanted to move past that and just kind of get an update from you on the sentiment on the streets of Moscow today. What are people saying and how are they feeling?
Well, I think that initially people had there was a surge of nationalistic pride that Russia had annexed Crimea. And that was the relatively easy step for Putin to take. I think that there's a certain amount of hesitation or nervousness about the possible next step, which would be Russia going to war with Ukraine. And I think that has people very much on edge.
All right, and we also have talked in the past about anti-Putin protests that took place in the streets of Moscow a couple of years ago after he became president again. Where is that sentiment right now? Are there still people willing to pack the streets of Moscow to protest Vladimir Putin?
There have been a couple of street protests against the annexation of Crimea, but they've been relatively small, and Putin right now is enjoying a surge of popularity because of the annexation of Crimea, sort of a nationalistic fervor in support of his actions. And so the opposition is laying low for the moment.
Now, we've also heard about the sanctions that have been imposed on Russian oligarchs. You're a professor at the National Academy, or the Academy of the National Economy, and so I assume you can talk a little bit about this, but you know, we've also seen the stock market hit the skids, the Moscow stock market hit the skids. The ruble has also declined in value. Now, you're saying despite those situations, Putin's popularity is still increasing. Explain to us how that's happening.
Well, first of all, most Russians don't own any stocks, and so they don't feel the impact from changes in the financial markets the way that Americans who have investments through mutual funds are very sensitive to changes in the financial markets. The oligarchs are people who have made their money thanks to the Russian state, and so they are not likely to stand up to Putin and say, look, the value of my investments are going down, because they owe those investments to Putin in the first place.
So, you know, when we hear the talk of more sanctions possibly coming, you don't feel like they'll have much of an impact at all?
Well, it's hard to gauge. It depends on what kind of sanctions. I think that the sanctions that we've seen so far have been visa restrictions or asset freezes on Russian bureaucrats who, frankly, weren't planning to go to Disneyland in the first place, and who don't have U.S. bank accounts. So far, the sanctions have been symbolic. However, if there were sanctions against oil exports or against exports of heavy machinery, this could very seriously affect the Russian economy and would have a real impact.
Now, taking place tomorrow, supposedly, Putin is going to negotiate with Ukrainian officials in Geneva. What options are available if folks like Angela Merkel from Germany and other European nations aren't really willing to impose those sanctions on Russian energy exports, because this will also have an impact on European countries? So what happens if there aren't really any meaningful sanctions put into place after this next negotiation period?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Right now, Putin is telling Ukraine basically at gunpoint, that I expect you to write a new constitution which shifts power from the central government to the regions, which will make them vulnerable to being subordinated to Moscow, to the Kremlin. And I want Ukraine to put in its constitution that it's going to be neutral and will never join anything like NATO. Whether or not the Ukrainian government, the present Ukrainian government, can stand up to this pressure is an open question. And I'm a little bit discouraged with the events of today, where several units of Ukrainian soldiers apparently defected to the Russian side, the pro-Russian militants that are operating in the Donetsk region. And one of the problems that the Ukrainian government has is that they've had a very corrupt government for the last 20 years, ever since independence, for the last 23 years. And the security services, the border service, parts of the military are infiltrated both with pro-Russian provocateurs and agents, and are also filled with corrupt officials who don't want the new government to succeed. So the new government really is facing kind of an uphill struggle to control events within their own country.
Yeah, certainly no easy answers here, especially when you look at the economic situation of the Ukraine, regardless of the current tension with Russia. Not great, not a great history for the Ukrainian economy. So it's a question, are we throwing good money after bad if we send money to the Ukraine? And, you know, where are these reports going, these possible defections? Are there more to come here? Or is this more of Vladimir Putin just stirring things up? Do you think that might be the case?
Well, I think definitely that Russia is doing everything it can to destabilize the country and stir up trouble in East Ukraine. I can tell you, I was in Kiev last month, and I was very impressed with the sense of solidarity among most people in Ukraine, both to have a new government that's going to hopefully do something about the corruption that is crippling the country, and also defend the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine. I personally have a lot of faith in the new government, because I think that they do have popular support, and I think they're trying to do something which is going to be very difficult, but I think they have the determination to do so.
All right, well, clearly they need more support from the United States and from European leaders as well. Mark Nuckols, our man in Moscow, if you let us call you that. It's great to talk to you, Mark, and we'll keep checking in with you. All right, have a great day, sir.
Okay, you too.
All right, Mark Nuckols in Moscow talking to us there live. Now, after the break, we want to hear what you are thinking about the situation in Ukraine. You think it's possible that Vladimir Putin is causing these defections some way, surreptitiously behind the scenes? You can reach out to us on social media. Our contact info is right on the screen right now. It's not too late to write into us. We'll be back with those comments and more right after this.